Look Back in Anger is a play by John Osborne. It concerns a love triangle involving an intelligent and educated but disaffected young man of working-class origin, his upper-middle-class, impassive wife, and her haughty best friend. Cliff, an amiable Welsh lodger, attempts to keep the peace. The play was a success on the London stage, and spawned the term angry young men to describe Osborne and those of his generation who employed the harshness of realism in the theatre in contrast to the more escapist theatre that characterised the previous generation. Background: written in 17 days in a deck chair on Morecambe Pier, Look Back in Anger was a strongly autobiographical piece based on Osborne's unhappy marriage to actress Pamela Lane and their life in cramped accommodation in Derby. While Osborne aspired towards a career in theatre, Lane was more practical and materialistic, not taking Osborne's ambitions seriously while cuckolding him with a local dentist. It also draws from Osborne's earlier life. For example, the wrenching speech of witnessing a loved one's death was a replay of the death of his father, Thomas. What it is best remembered for, though, are Jimmy's tirades. Some of these are directed against generalized British middle-class smugness in the post-atomic world. Many are directed against the female characters, a very distinct echo of Osborne's uneasiness with women, including his mother, Nellie Beatrice, whom he describes in his autobiography A Better Class of Person as hypocritical, self-absorbed, calculating and indifferent. Madeline, the lost love Jimmy pines for, is based on Stella Lyndon, the older rep company actress who first encouraged Osborne to write. After the first production in London, Osborne began a relationship with Mary Ure, who played Alison. He divorced his first wife Pamela Lane to marry Ure in 1957. Production: the play was premiered at London's Royal Court Theatre, on May 8, 1956 by the English Stage Company under the direction of Tony Richardson, setting by Alan Tagg, and music for songs by Tom Eastwood. The press release called the author an angry young man, a phrase that came to represent a new movement in 1950s British theatre. Legend has it that audiences gasped at the sight of an ironing board on a London stage. The cast was as follows: Kenneth Hay, Alan Bates, Mary Ure, Helena Hughes and John Welsh. The following year, the production moved to Broadway under producer David Merrick and director Tony Richardson. Retaining the original cast but starring Vivienne Drummond as Helena, it would receive 3 Tony Award nominations including for Best Play and Best Dramatic Actress for Year. Setting: time the present, the action throughout takes place in the Porter's one-room flat in the Midlands. Act I Scene 1 Euro early evening, April. Act 2, Scene 1 Euro 2 weeks later, Scene 2 Euro the following evening. Act 3, Scene 1 Euro several months later, Scene 2 Euro a few minutes later. Synopsis: Act 1 Act 1 opens on a dismal Sunday afternoon in Jimmy and Alison's cramped attic in the Midlands. Jimmy and Cliff are attempting to read the Sunday papers, plus the Radical Weekly, price 9p, obtainable at any bookstall as Jimmy snaps, claiming it from Cliff. This is a reference to the New Statesman, and in the context of the period would have instantly signaled the pair's political preference to the audience. Alison is attempting to do the week's earning and is only half listening as Jimmy and Cliff engage in the expository dialogue. It becomes apparent that there is a huge social gulf between Jimmy and Alison. Her family is upper-middle-class military, perhaps verging on upper-class, while Jimmy is decidedly working-class. He had to fight hard against her family's disapproval to win her. Alison's mummy and I took one look at each other, and from then on the age of chivalry was dead, he explains. We also learned that the sole family income is derived from a sweet stall in the local market Euro an enterprise that is surely well beneath Jimmy's education, let alone Alison's station in life. As Act 1 progresses, Jimmy becomes more and more vituperative, transferring his contempt for Alison's family onto her personally, calling her pusillanimous, and generally belittling her to Cliff. It is possible to play this scene as though Jimmy thinks everything is just a joke, but most actors opt for playing it as though he really is excoriating her. The tirade ends with some physical horseplay, resulting in the ironing board overturning and Alison's arm getting a burn. Jimmy exits to play his trumpet off stage. Allison and Cliff play a tender scene, during which he confides that she's accidentally pregnant and can't quite bring herself to tell Jimmy. Cliff urges her to tell him. When Jimmy returns, Allison announces that her actress friend Helena Charles is coming to stay, and it is entirely obvious that Jimmy despises Helena even more than Allison. He flies into a total rage, and conflict is inevitable. Act 2 Act 2 opens on another Sunday afternoon, with Helena and Allison making lunch. In a two-handed scene, Allison gives a clue as to why she decided to take Jimmy on her own minor rebellion against her upbringing plus her admiration of Jimmy's campaigns against the dereliction of life in post-war England. She describes Jimmy to Helena as a knight in shining armor. Helena says, firmly, "You've got to fight him." Jimmy enters, and the tirade continues. If his Act 1 material could be played as a joke, there's no doubt about the intentional viciousness of his attacks on Helena. When the women put on hats and declare that they are going to church, Jimmy's sense of betrayal peaks. When he leaves to take an urgent phone call, Helena announces that she has forced the issue. She has sent a telegram to Allison's parents asking them to come and rescue her. Allison is stunned but agrees that she will go. After a scene break, we see Allison's father, Colonel Redfern, who has come to collect her to take her back to her family home. The playwright allows the Colonel to come across as quite a sympathetic character, albeit totally out of touch with the modern world. "You're hurt because everything's changed," Allison tells him, and Jimmy's hurt because everything's stayed the same. Helena arrives to say goodbye, intending to leave very soon herself. Allison is surprised that Helena is staying on for another day, but she leaves, giving Cliff a note for Jimmy. Cliff in turn hands it to Helena and leaves, saying, "I hope he rams it up your nostrils." Almost immediately, Jimmy bursts in. His contempt at finding a goodbye note makes him turn on Helena again, warning her to keep out of his way until she leaves. Helena tells him that Allison is expecting a baby, and Jimmy admits grudgingly that he's taken aback. However, his tirade continues. They first come to physical blows, and then as the Act 2 curtain falls, Jimmy and Helena are kissing passionately and falling on the bed. Act 3 Act 3 opens as a deliberate replay of Act 1, but this time with Helena at the ironing board wearing Jimmy's Act 1 red shirt. Months have passed. Jimmy is notably more pleasant to Helena than he was to Allison in Act 1. She actually laughs at his jokes, and the three of them get into a music hall comedy routine that obviously is not improvised. Cliff announces that he's decided to strike out on his own. As Jimmy leaves the room to get ready for a final night out for the three of them, he opens the door to find Allison, looking like death. Instead of caring for her, he snaps over his shoulder, "Friend of yours to see you," and abruptly leaves. After a scene break, Allison explains to Helena that she lost the baby. One of Jimmy's cruelest speeches in Act 1 expressed the wish that Allison would conceive a child and lose it. The two women reconcile, but Helena realizes that what she's done is immoral and she in turn decides to leave. She summons Jimmy to hear her decision and he lets her go with a sarcastic farewell. The play ends with a sentimental reconciliation between Jimmy and Allison. They revive an old game they used to play, pretending to be bears and squirrels, and seem to be in a state of truce. Critical reception. At the time of production, reviews of Look Back in Anger were deeply negative. Kenneth Danan and Harold Hobson were among the few critics to praise it, and are now regarded among the most influential critics of the time. For example, on BBC Radio's The Critics, Ivor Brown began his review by describing the play's setting a one-room flat in the Midlands as unspeakably dirty and squalid, such that it was difficult for him to believe that a colonel's daughter, brought up with some standards, would have lived in it. He expressed anger at having watched something that wasted his time. The Daily Mail's Cecil Wilson wrote that the beauty of Mary Ure was frittered away on a pathetic wife, who, judging by the time she spends ironing, seems to have taken on the nation's laundry. Indeed, Allison, Ure's character, irons during Act 1, makes lunch in Act 2, and leaves the ironing to her rival in Act 3. On the other hand, Kenneth Danan wrote that he could not love anyone who did not wish to see Look Back in Anger, describing the play as a minor miracle containing all the qualities one had despaired of ever seeing on the stage. The drift towards anarchy, the instinctive leftishness, the automatic rejection of official attitudes, the surrealist sense of humor, the casual promiscuity, the sense of lacking a crusade worth fighting for and, underlying all these, the determination that no one who dies shall go unmourned. Harold Hobson was also quick to recognize the importance of the play as a landmark of British theatre. He praised Osborne for the play, despite the fact that the blinkers still obscure his vision. Alan Sillitoe, author of Saturday Night and Sunday Morning and The Loneliness of the Long-Distance Runner, wrote that Osborne didn't contribute to British theatre, he set off a landmine and blew most of it up. Sequel. In 1989 Osborne wrote a sequel to the play entitled Da Copyright Ja Vu, which was first produced in 1992. Da Copyright Ja Vu depicted Jimmy Porter, now known as JP, in middle age, living with his daughter Alison. He rants about the state of the country to his old friend Cliff, while his Alison irons, just as her mother had done in Look Back. The play was not a commercial success, closing after 7 weeks. It was Osborne's last play. Film adaptations: a British film adaptation starring Richard Burton, Claire Bloom, and Mary Ure and directed by Tony Richardson was made in 1958, and released in 1959. The screenplay was written by the play's author, John Osborne, with Nigel Neal. Interior set design was by Loudon Saintville. The film was nominated in 4 categories in the 1959 BAFTA Awards, including a Best Actor nomination for Richard Burton, but it did not win any of them. In the United States, the film failed at the box office. A version released in 1980 was directed by Lindsay Anderson and David Hugh Jones. The 1989 version was a British videotape TV drama. In popular culture, Media an episode of the BBC radio comedy series Hancock's Half Hour paid tribute to Osborne's play in the East Cheam Drama Festival. The episode features the regular cast spoofing a number of theatrical genres, with Look Back in Anger recast as Look Back in Hungary a new play by the hungry young man, Mr. John Eastbourne. Scriptwriters Alan Simpson and Ray Galton mimic several elements of Osborne's play, from Jimmy's railing against the iniquities of modern life to the values of middle-class bourgeois life. Ed Wood, Look Back in Angora, a 1994 documentary about Ed Wood, a B-movie director, released by Rhino Home Video. The cross-dressing Wood often wore an Angora sweater, and Angora fabric is featured in many of his films. In Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip, an American dramedy television series by Aaron Sorkin, the character Andy McInat translates Look Back in Anger into Dutch. Look Back in Annoyance is the title of a retrospective episode of Daria, an animated television series. Music Look Back in Anger is a song by British singer David Bowie from his 1979 album Lodger. Look Back in Anger is a song by British rock group Television Personalities from their first album. And Don't the Kids Just Love It? Don't Look Back in Anger is a song by the British rock band Oasis on Morning Glory. See also, Look Back in Anger. Further reading, Osborne, John. A Better Class of Person, an Autobiography, 1929 56. Penguin Books Limited. ISBN 978-0-14-006288-5. Osborne, John. Almost a Gentleman, an Autobiography, 1955 66. Faber and Faber. ISBN 0-571-16635-0. References. External links: Look Back in Anger at the Internet Broadway Database.